twice today.
Oh God, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I've watched it. I mean, like I have now watched it multiple times myself. Also, having lived through it. Yeah, no, it tears your soul right out of your body. Darn good tootin' there. I'm joking.
That's one way to explain.
Yeah, I mean, I joke about it because, I don't know, usually, like, I deal with super heavy subjects with levity just because, like, I don't know, it's just how my brain works or how it's, like, wired. But,
humor to cope is, like, really quality, so.
Yeah, dark humor and all that good stuff. But, yeah, no, I've talked to several people about it at this point, and, I don't know. I did not expect, like, nearly the response from the larger community. Like, I don't know. It's almost like one of those things that feels like it's one of those like a conversation starter. Which I'm not saying like as a good in a good term. Like I'm saying that almost like either neutrally or explicitly is a bad thing. Like I don't want the conversation to revolve around me. I'm just trying to chill here and vibe and play my video games, and do research. And so like, I'm definitely interested in your thoughts, and just kind of, I don't know, like, so you've watched it twice now, like, kind of where are you at with it?
Honestly, kind of confused.
Okay.
I think I understand some of your definitions.
Okay.
I think, but then when I go to articulate them, maybe I'm getting them wrong. Okay. So I'm catching that you have two types of gender. Subjective gender and objective gender. Oh no. Oh, I wonder if I can do something to fix. You were a little bit earlier too, so let me.
I mean, like now you're coming through fine. It was just like cutting out a little bit before. But yeah, so
okay.
Subjective and objective gender. Yeah, no, that's the terminology I used in that discussion. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are getting tripped up on objective gender. I keep kind of messing up the definition a little bit myself. I keep seeing it as like dominant or hegemonic masculinity or dominant or hegemonic femininity, right? Which is more, from my idea, a prescriptive type of gender rather than a descriptive type of gender. Like how men are supposed to be versus how women are supposed to be according to society, right?
I mean, like, I understand. Like, I mean, like, I don't think I'm advocating for a prescriptive. Like, I'm not trying to say, like, how people should be. And I don't think that any of the literature is trying to say how people should be either.
No, that's where, like, what I'm saying is I often talk about those forms of gender, and so I keep going back to define it that way, and I don't think that's necessarily what you are saying. Okay. So how would you, because there are other types of, like, when I say dominant masculinity, that implies that's not, like, all of masculinity, right? There's other types of masculinity. So what you're trying to do is define, like, an objective, or, I don't know, like, is it, like, a collection of societal ideas of what it is to be a man that makes manhood in the objective sense?
Kinda. So, I mean, like, can I try and explain? Because, I mean, like, maybe it's just, like, the terminology. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm realizing this, because I've talked to several people about this, like, using the term objective. So I'm using it in kind of, like, the way that it's conveyed in, like, legal discussion. Like, when we're talking about, like, negligence or similar standards, usually we talk about standards of objectivity and subjectivity. And so that's kind of the framework I'm approaching this from. Objectivity in that sense refers to, like, if we were to construct a hypothetical reasonable person that's representative of the average attitudes, like all the average attitudes in society on a particular subject, and then we ask that person essentially what they thought as a representative of the average person in society on a given issue, then whatever answer they gave would be like the objective standard. A good example, or the example that's always used, is, for example, in tort law, like on the first day, they will, like, a professor will usually bring up the example of, like, someone who leaves a skateboard at the top of the stairs in a house where there's, like, an old grandfather who is likely not to see it and likely to fall down, you know? any reasonable person, like if we're using like an objective standard of reasonableness, like any reasonable person should be able to look at that situation and say that by putting that skateboard at the top of the stairs, that you are acting negligent, right? That you are acting negligently. That's something that even if you did not overtly intentionally cause the outcome, the grandfather to fall down the stairs, that you well should have known, right? And so here, the way that I'm trying to use it is essentially as a way to capture like a given group, whether it's society or whether it's something like a Discord or, you know, like some defined amount of a group or a society or a culture. Like it's trying to capture whatever the common trends are, or the common, like, not necessarily hard and fast definitions, but like the average qualities that most reasonable people within that group would take as qualities that would define a certain gender, right? Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. So something that I recognize. I guess no. My question is like, what are your goals in the wider Twitch community, or in like your, not necessarily the wider Twitch community, but specifically your Twitch community? And I think I saw a little bit of this at the end of that video, but
yeah, I don't know if you were watching it there. Yeah, you got a little heated gamer moment. I usually am not like that, but sometimes. Anyway, so
we're all human.
Broadly, my goal in what I do here, because I always try to be like very, like I try to like do something with my chat, you know, like I'm not just here, like if I didn't want to do anything, that I would just be an ESO streamer and I would just not talk about politics, right? The reason that I try to talk about what I do is because, broadly speaking, in some form or another, I want to like do some kind of material good for the world. And with, I guess, my community here, insofar as that conversation is concerned, the material good is making sure that everyone in my community is armed with arguments that can withstand any kind of scrutiny, so that if they go out and do any kind of advocacy on their own, then they could be able to rely on those arguments to a reasonable degree of certainty.
Okay, so I think one thing that I've been struggling with, you know, I'm very, I guess, I like academic conversations of gender, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've ended up doing is I still use academic language and I like to define that, but then I have a lot of conversations where I work on not using academic language and using more like colloquial language.
Sure.
And that's one of the things I noticed a lot of people struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I mean, like so in terms of like this conversation, or just in general, or both?
I guess that conversation you were having at the time, and then I guess generally so. I do think it's important. I think it's awesome that you do. I'm not suggesting you like remove talking about law language and explaining that to people.
Mm-hmm.
But in the service of trying to give Demon Mama, for example, a way to articulate to her community, you know, some of these arguments, I wonder if it could be improved a bit by moving away from that law language, because that's something I see people consistently understanding from a more colloquial perspective, and it gets in the way of understanding the points you're making, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, like, the thing about it, right, is that like one important thing about this conversation is that there's a couple of things that upon introspection or reflection that went wrong in that conversation. And I say went wrong, and I would largely put it on Demon Mama. If you want to say that I could have used clearer language, then I think I can agree. Like, I've heard that criticism multiple times, and I'm trying to be clearer with my language. I thought I had defined everything adequately, but I mean, like, I can always improve that if that's necessary. The problem that happened in that conversation is that essentially at the beginning, we were talking in basically the same tone that we are talking in right now between you and I. And I mean, I don't know. I've talked to multiple people about this at this point, right? Like, whenever I'm in a conversation, I'm going to probably be like the last person to escalate the situation, you know, or to like make things heated or whatever. And in that situation, it felt like, because, and my read of the situation, and you can take what you want of this, is that because Demon Mama may have had trouble understanding me, instead of asking me to define my terms or trying to genuinely understand what I was saying, she actually took the alternative approach of just starting to attack me personally, instead of actually engaging with me, and proceeded to like demean me, talk down to me, whatever have you.
I really hate interrupting you, but I'm gonna interrupt you really quick.
Okay.
I actually, one of the things I really want to avoid in this conversation is putting fault on one or the other. Though I think that's a thing that people can do, that's not something I'm interested in doing in this conversation. I would like to analyze and look at like where you think you could have improved. I'm not saying that it was on you. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I think that there are ways I could have improved the conversation, right? But if you're just asking me like why it happened, well, I mean, like I guess that you're not talking about that, but yeah, like no, I can broadly agree that like if we divorce it from like the circumstances, like how the situation came into be, that yeah, there's always ways I can improve.
Okay, what do you like? What are some of your ideas around that upon reflection of the conversation?
Yeah, so yesterday I had, well, actually I had over the past couple days I've had several talks, some with larger figures who I have talked to offline, some who I have talked to online. One of those conversations was with Destiny, who actually gave me some good pointers, some of which were just like other ways I could have approached that particular issue. So for example, like when we're talking about like pure self-identification and some of the logical problems, you can get into that. You know, like there are other examples I certainly could have brought up, like for example, like transracialism, if you want to say that, or
Yeah,
like being
that's a
able,
tough one.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, like that's a really, it's an important thing to talk about here, because I mean, like that's the kind of hypothetical where it really puts stress on the idea that like, okay, you can self-identify into a certain social category, and if the only sufficient criteria is self-identification, then what about this other very similar social criteria? Like you would say that there's a meaningful distinction there, but then it's like, okay, so we're acknowledging that there's something more than just self-identification, maybe like something underneath, and that there's something. So like that's one thing that I saw that I could improve on. Another example is the idea of like being very specific in the, being able to know the difference between a particular and a category. I didn't realize this, but like when Demon was like saying that certain things were an object, I had no idea what she was saying, and I still don't believe that like that's actual like linguistic argumentation, because I've spoken to several people who are pretty knowledgeable about linguistics and like logic at this point, and what like the best characterization I've heard of that argument is essentially that she was talking about largely like a particular in certain instances. Like, for example, when I was like, all right, well, why can't you identify as Jesus motherfucking Christ? The reason why is because, well, philosophically, like, that's a particular, we're able to recognize that there's like certain criteria for like a particular thing, and that's different for recognizing that there's like specific criteria for a category. So I'm going to start using that as a way to be able to explain that idea. I hadn't thought of that argument before, so that was good to be able to learn. I learned what a tautology was. I didn't realize what a tautology was. Yesterday I had a conversation with someone who studied logic extensively, and I learned what a tautology is. So now if I ever encounter that specific argument, then I'll be able to respond and like very clearly articulate exactly like, you know, what that means, the implications of taking gender to be a tautology, and like the kinds of problems that there are with that. And also just like how to generally manage my own like temper or position in like a situation like that, where someone is probably like, and again, whether or not you agree with this, even like if I'm of the impression that someone is like goading me on or trying to like get a specific response out of me, how to be able to like just keep my head a little calmer and just, you know, make sure that I'm not either giving them what they are looking for in terms of like a more heated response, or conversely, like, you know, just generally keeping my chill.
So was your goal, what was your primary goal in that? Well, I guess you want to give people logical arguments. I guess one of my concerns is,
well, my primary goal was to help, right? Like we were having like a friendly conversation, and I just heard something that was like legitimately concerning to me. So I was just operating out of a place of concern, and that honestly was true basically up until the end.
So do you think that well, did you get through all of the things you would have improved in that conversation? Let me make sure that that's wrapped up.
Those are probably, let me think. Oh, and also just to make sure, Because like basically throughout the entirety of the conversation, I was acting as if, and I mean like chat, you can do whatever you want with this. I was operating under the impression for a lot of the time that I was talking to someone who was acting in good faith. I was treating her like I was talking to a friend in a lot of the ways, because like I did legitimately think I was, and it was very like alarming to me. It was jarring to me, like a lot of what was happening. I mean, like, yeah, like in effect, I did kind of lose a friend there. I've actually lost several. A lot of people have left my community over this. But I mean, like, I also need to be able to recognize that, like, listen, that was explicitly admonishable behavior, at least in my opinion. Like, and I think that's not a hard read in that, like, in the course of those conversations, I just need to be able to recognize that quicker and be able to respond. Because there's different ways that you respond to, that you talk to people who you think are and are not acting in good faith. And I think that those are basically all the things that I learned from the conversation, at least so far.
What does good faith mean to you?
Yeah, so I defined it the other day. Like I had to do a talk with people because it seems like a lot of people call things good faith. So basically, I define good faith in like one of two ways. Often they overlap. It's some combination of representing a idea that's not a genuine belief. And so, like, for example, representing an idea that you don't genuinely believe. So, like, if you're a legislator and you say that you don't want X civil rights law to pass at the federal level because you believe in heavy quotations states' rights, there's a good chance you're probably acting in bad faith because you don't actually care about the rights of states. You just want to hate on that minority, right? So, like, that's one example of bad faith. Another example is if you have your beliefs as you state them sufficiently refuted and you do not choose to change your mind on a particular subject. Like, you just choose to look the argument that someone gives to you in the face that sufficiently refutes your idea, and you just choose to look at that and be like, nope, I don't care. And then often these things can overlap because if you don't represent what you actually believe, then no one can actually refute your ideas because you aren't actually representing what they actually are. But generally, like those two ideas, right? Not representing what you actually believe and refusing to change your mind in the face of compelling evidence to the contrary of what you believe.
So, one of my interests is being able to change people's mind. And from what I was getting at, it sounds like, are you saying that you need to only be engaging when someone is in good faith under those definitions?
What do you mean only? I mean, like, I've engaged with people who operate in bad faith. Like, I've brought people, like, for example, like TERFs, great example. I've debated TERFs on my channel, and they're totally acting in bad faith because, like, great example is I debated one super TERFy guy who literally, you could do a drinking game. I wouldn't recommend it because you'd probably go to the hospital. In the course of a debate where he just said, I want to build a bridge. He didn't want to build a bridge. He literally, like, the end of the conversation was, like, I asked him very pointedly, like, all right, how would you actually, like, you have to tell me how you would determine someone going into the bathroom, whether or not they were a man or a woman. And he said, oh, you'd have to look at their genitals, right? Like, that person 1000% didn't want to build a bridge. He just wanted to hate on trans people, right? I think that there's still benefit to talking to those people. Just, you know, in those kind of conversations, you just dunk on them and you show the audience how ridiculous their ideas are because they don't deserve to be respected because they're just bigoted. But it's obviously a different way of talking to people compared to, like, you know, like the way that we're talking right now. Like, I know you, I know that you're a good person, talking to you in good faith. Like, I'm not operating under that same kind of mentality, right? Like, I'm not trying to, like, dunk or whatever because, like, you know, I like you and you're cool. Yeah, so I think that, like... So no, I think it's fine to engage with people who are acting in bad faith. I think you just have to go in with a very different mentality, right? Because you're not trying to change their mind. You're trying to show the audience why what they believe is ridiculous or wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I didn't articulate my question well. Okay. I'm trying to kind of, what do you think changes people's minds?
I think it's a lot of things, right? So some people... It's like you're gonna see a couple different things, right? I do think that there are gonna be a lot of people on the internet who are changed just by, like, being shown that their idea. I don't know. Like, basically, I've seen different kinds of people online. So I think that there's, like, if we want to have, like, some different categories, I'm gonna name off some different categories of people that I've observed, and you can tell me if you believe this to be true or not, or if you think this is accurate. One category of people are the people who are, like, for lack of a better term, like the debate bros. They're the people who watch someone who they ascribe beliefs to, debates someone else, and then if the other person sufficiently like refutes or like heavy quotations like owns the person who those people ascribe their beliefs to, then they're probably going to feel stupid and they're going to change their minds because they don't want to feel stupid. That's one type of person. That's not all people, but that's like one type of person. Another type of person is like the person who needs a friend. Like some people are so dug into their positions that they won't change them unless like basically, like for example, like there's a lot of people who I know back in my hometown who have like pretty terrible opinions about trans people. But then I came out and literally like night and day, because they all like me there, they just all changed their minds and they're like, oh yeah, I like trans people now because I like you, and therefore I must like them because I like you. That's another thing that changes people's minds. Something else is like actually exploring ideas. I'm not sure how many people this describes because unfortunately a lot of people like to think that they read literature and that they're super duper smart and relying on heavy quotations, facts, and logic when they don't. Conservatives are very guilty of this very often. But I think that there are some people out there who actually do like legitimately like the pursuit of knowledge and base their opinions off of what the literature or like off of whatever their pursuit of knowledge is able to discern to them. Those are good people. I want you in my chat. Please get into my chat. You're good people. And you know, like and then there are variations thereof. But like the TLDRs, I think there are a lot of ways to change different people's minds, but I think that, you know, you just need like a variety of tactics, right? I like being able to educate people because that'll get like some people who are interested in the pursuit of knowledge. I like being able to debate people because that's going to get the debate bros. And I like being able to like get to know chat because then I can make friends with them, and that's probably going to get people on itself, right? But just like a lot of different ways to be able to change people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Though there is some research on changing people's minds, and it does seem a lot of people switch their minds more based on that common ground, working within that common ground. And it might take a few conversations, or maybe quite more than a few, especially on these more identity based conversations.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? Because I hear you talking about logic. Are you like very dedicated to only using the tool? I assume that's not the case of logic.
In this case, no. I think that like most of the time, I don't know. Like it's a like to me it's a tool, the same as anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so like here, essentially the evolution of my understanding of this is that like most of the time when we're able to like when we're making certain civil rights arguments, like hard logic probably doesn't become like super relevant a lot of the time, right? A lot of the people who I know who talk about logic a lot will bring it up in terms of like veganism discussions, which I specifically avoid. I'm putting that on hold into perpetuity, or for as long as I can. But I mean,
why is that?
Just because I just don't want to commit to it. Like I know that if I engage with it, like basically my opinion is I'm reasonably sure that if I engage with it, then I'll have to come to the conclusion that it's the morally right thing to do, and then I'll have some moral obligation. So I'm just like postponing. So I'll just be like postpone.
Let's come talk about veganism.
I'm just postponing it. All right. Listen, we can talk about it someday. Just let me get to a better place in life. I'm focusing on a lot of things right now. All right.
Hey, Riley, do you want to learn how to cook tofu? Come over sometime. I'm learning how to cook tofu.
Oh God. All right. Sometime, sure. But anyway, so formal logic will come up in those kind of conversations often, and they do come up in conversations about gender because while it's not necessary for like every single discussion on gender, it comes up very often with like really, especially like the people who often bring up this are people like TERFs, and not just like TERFs who don't know what they're talking about and just are trying to look for anything to be able to like discredit trans people, but like really, I shouldn't say like really smart TERFs, but TERFs with decent arguments, right? Like TERFs with arguments that like if you don't have a sufficient knowledge of the logical arguments they are making, then you might not be able to know how to respond to them, right? So often the argument that I hear from like the most hardcore TERFs ever, the ones who like know just enough about logic to be able to make a coherent argument, is to point out that, hey, when you say gender is anyone who identifies as that gender, that's a logical regress, or that's an infinite regress. It's a meaningless statement logically. And technically, if you take that in isolation, it's true. Now, fortunately, the other day I was able to have a conversation with someone who actually like is supportive of trans rights and knows about formal logic, and was able to convey to me basically like a way to kind of get out the same idea. I mean, like I would say that my definition effectively gets you the same result, because if you were to sit here and tell me like, hi, I'm Lumi and I go by they them pronouns and I'm non-binary, then like even under my definition I would say, oh yeah, then you're a non-binary. I wouldn't dispute that, right? I just have like a different way of getting to that outcome that specifically avoids this issue. But the other person who I talked to elicited like another way to be able to do it, right? And it's just important to like recognize these kind of discussions, because if we don't recognize them here, then like in areas where it can really count, like for example, a lot of TERFs who are getting involved very heavily in legislation, right? There are thank you for are you good at mathematics? I don't know, but thank you for $2. Anyway, so like for example, there are unfortunately a lot of like very anti-trans organizations trying to push legislation right now, right? Like there are a lot of them. Like I was talking to someone in my community, Josie Caballera, and so it's really cool that she's here because she's actually the head researcher at the National Center for Transgender Equality, which is super cool. But she also has a policy background, and so she's been really educating me. And essentially what's happening right now is all across the country, like every, like in a vast, I think it's the majority of states actually. I think it's more than, I think it's like around 30 states or so right now. They are proposing either anti-trans athletic bans or trans youth healthcare bans. And that's really terrifying because like the trans athlete argument from a empiricist standpoint is really hard. And if you just make the argument trans women are women, so we should let them compete in sports, that's not necessarily going to be able to convince people when other people who are making the other arguments are basically going to do like the Ben Shapiro equivalent of, oh, look at all the crazy transes who are just saying their mantra that doesn't actually mean anything. We're here actually giving you like heavy quotations, facts and evidence, or like facts and logic. They're just trying to get what they want without actually proving that they deserve what they want logically. And so you need to be able to go into those conversations. Oh, hold on. Thank you, Josie. 16 trans sports and 12 trans med. Thank you. As far as like states pushing those kinds of laws right now. And so what's important in those kind of conversations, for example, like I have a trans sports doc on my website or on my my Twitter at RGR docs, right? And that's a document which is able to show that if you look at the totality of the evidence that, for example, there's a, and I need to be like very particular about my wording because like this is probably the most, like in my opinion, the most complicated empiricist argument for like on trans rights right now. Like it's like this and are trans women are like the hardest arguments in my opinion. But like if you look at the totality of literature, I am of the opinion that like the most consistent walkaway from that literature is that there is no inherent immutable athletic advantage that trans women have over cis women at any stage of their transition, and also that excluding trans women from women's sports increases the risk of suicide. And so if we take into account the fact that like consistently the literature recognizes that since even the literature recognizes that since biological sex isn't strictly binary and there's like multiple different variables which account for like how you define biological sex, then really we should define like who competes with who in terms of sports based on like what goals we're trying to achieve, right? Like what are the goals that we as people who, I'm saying we, not necessarily you and I, but like people who run athletic communities, like what are the goals that we want to be able to achieve, right? And so like being able to look at like, listen, there's no credible research that trans women have an inherent immutable athletic advantage. And also like, if we exclude them, it's probably going to increase their risk of suicide. So like, we should like, come on, it's a sport. Like, be real. Like, just let trans women compete in sports. Like, you're literally bashing on high school girls for like saying that, oh, they're going to destroy the concept of women's sports. Like, no. But I mean, like, you can't, but like, it's very hard to respond to a really to like a good TERF argument without that kind of background, right? Like if you're responding with just trans women are women, that's not only going to come off as unconvincing, but that's going to make it substantively harder to be able to advocate adequately for the rights of trans people in those kind of circumstances, and those laws will pass and trans people will suffer as a consequence, you know? So that's usually, but like in most circumstances, like formal logic doesn't necessarily come up, but when it does, it's just good to be able to know how to use it. Sorry, that was a lot, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just wondering, like, what do you think from a tactical perspective? Not necessarily, I know you learn more on what you could have done logically, which is excellent. I think we should, I'm of the opinion that the more we can get people that logical foundation, the better it is. But what do you think you could have done in that conversation that would have been different on a tactical level to actually reach Demon Mama?
oh, I thought I did everything I reasonably could. I mean, like maybe like in the moment, I thought like I legitimately was constantly thinking of every way that I could be able to reach her. I think that like if I could go back now and use some of the arguments that I know now that I had learned after the fact, then like I could have obviously used those. But I think that as I was going through the moment, like literally the thing that was in my mind throughout the entirety of the time was, okay, she still doesn't understand. How can I help her understand? Because she was being like it took me a while to come to the realization that she was being deliberately obtuse and refusing to listen to me. I assumed that for the longest time she was being a good faith actor. But then basically, like it was only up until the end of the conversation when she insulted me again and said that I only cared about like proving my own validity as a trans person, that it just like really clicked for me, like, okay, this person's not acting good faith. She's just deliberately trying to ignore me and trying to like get a dunk on me or trying to like personally insult me or trying to get me mad. Like this is not someone who I really care to actually grow or improve.
Why do you think she I mean
Well, I mean, like I think based on her actions, you know? Like I can't read someone's mind. I can only go off of what they say.
No, yeah, I understand that, right? I think the struggle I get at is sometimes people engage in these bad faith actions, but they aren't like a bad faith person. What leads someone to start doing this?
Oh, I don't know. Like anyone can have any number of reasons. Oh, hold on. Oh, then why didn't she upload the video? I don't know. Maybe she realized that she did something wrong after. Why didn't she apologize? I still have heard absolutely nothing from her. If she wanted to, she could have like texted me like, hey, sorry, I acted out of line. I shouldn't have impugned you personally. I shouldn't have attacked you personally. I'm sorry. That was shitty of me. Like she could have done that. I still have yet to get anything like that. I still have yet to hear anything from her except for absolute radio silence. Weird how that is. But as far as I'm sorry, can you ask the question again? I saw that someone in my chat said that.
I guess I was. So I guess I'm still operating under the idea that at the beginning she was good faith.
Yeah. Like how?
Right.
No, yeah, like that. But I mean, like that's the thing, right? Is that like, I genuinely was under that impression too. You know, like I do like at the beginning, like before that, we had like a joking debate about whether or not furries deserved rights, and we had like this like pseudo debate in the middle of that about like whether or not Godzilla or King Kong would win. Like it was fun, you know, like it genuinely was. The problem was that like it was so weird to me because again, like essentially, like could you imagine if we were having the conversation that we are having right now and just out of nowhere I just started like attacking you personally or like giving little like trying to instigate you, like trying to get you mad. Like could you imagine how that would feel like if that just came out of the blue, out of nowhere right at this moment? Like that's essentially what happened there, you know? Like I don't know why she did that. Like I can't tell you why. The best I can do is guess based off of her actions, and my guess is that that I was trying to express ideas that she didn't understand. And like if she doesn't understand them, like that's fine. But if you don't understand something, then it's on you to not like respond with certainly like attacking someone personally, and like to, you know, like just be able to ask, like clarify, like, oh hey, I've never heard of that idea before, can you explain that to me, right? Like I think that especially given our relationship, that she should have understood that I was not trying to do anything negative to her or anyone personally. Like she should have known that, and she should have treated me accordingly. But she didn't, right? Like she, like even if she didn't know, and I think that's like the reason why she acted the way that she did, there are better ways to be able to handle that. Like there are more mature ways to be able to handle those situations. But yeah, that's my take, is essentially like so to answer your question again, that like I think that essentially she didn't understand the concepts I was explaining, which is fine. If people don't understand them, then I'm happy to explain them. But essentially that she responded with a very that she responded by like trying to attack me personally and essentially put on her debate me, like the debate me bro kind of persona or whatever.
So I guess the like position I'm kind of coming from, and I'm curious your take on that, is, you know, when we're talking about something that is a trans issue,
Yeah.
and someone is trans, it can, especially like one of those really core ideas like self-identification, can feel so important and feel like a very personal identity thing, right? So someone can act emotionally, like we are not necessarily like super logical creatures, right? So when she starts acting emotionally, and in you as well, like it could be anyone, right? When anyone starts acting that like with that emotion and doing that bad, whether you want to call that bad faith or whatever the case may be, I think that's pretty human. And we end up having to navigate around that, right? That's a part of like changing people's minds. So I just end up wondering, like, do we dedicate ourselves to logic and hammering that point when we're starting to see that? Or do we, like, is there something better that can be done there?
Yeah, so I think that, well, I think that there's a couple things there, right? I mean, like, to an extent, I kind of, I kind of did, right? Like, again, I think that if you look at, like, the vast majority, if not, like, all that conversation except where she attacks me and I respond, I think that the vast majority of it is just, like, me trying to, like, be calm and explain an idea to her that it is that's clear that she doesn't understand, right? Like, normally, that's the approach that I would take is like, okay, if someone's being like a little emotional or is like not responding well to something, then like I'll slow down. Like literally, like there's the point where she took me off speed. Like I was like kind of seething at that point, you know. I was like, oh, she's like basically telling her audience I'm too angry or emotional to be taken seriously at this point. But you know, like I gathered myself. I was like, okay, clearly, like I know that she's wrong. I know that she's like trying to come off like looking better to her audience or whatever. So I just took a deep breath. I was like, okay, hey, listen, I don't want you to attack me personally. I'm not going to attack you personally. I never did attack her personally. And then I just went through and tried to be as calm and collected and explaining an idea as I could. And I tried to listen to her and I tried to be responsive. Like these are the things that I would normally say that people should do. In those kinds of circumstances. Like when you're asking me like what should someone do in those circumstances, I think that I did the right thing, or I think that I did what I would instruct people to do if I were asked that, like if other people were asking me. But like in that circumstance, I think that like, so basically like so that's what I would say that you do in those circumstances, right? If you think that someone is acting like that, and you want to help like get an idea across to them, then, you know, it could be good to like slow down, be like, hey, listen, I don't want you to attack me. I don't want to attack you. I just want to explain this idea. Oh, hold on. Someone added me in chat. I'm going to pin that and come back to it. But essentially, like, you know, just be like, hey, listen, I don't want you to attack me. I don't want to attack you. I just want to get through this idea, okay? Because I care about you, you know? And I think that normally that should be able to work. Now, in this situation, it didn't. So to me, the question afterwards is like, okay, so in that case, like, all right, how do we handle this after the fact? Because, I can't remember who I said this to. I said something like this to Destiny. Like, I was like, listen, even considering everything that happened, like, I care about her in the same way that I care about, like, a person, right? So, like, I want her to be well. And so, like, essentially, like, then there's this question of like, all right, so let's assume that someone treats it, that like someone has this kind of reaction in this situation. Let's say that it's happened, it's in the past. How do we get like some form of restitution? And the way that I usually do it is like, I don't think that there's necessarily like an onus on the person, like in me in this situation. But I do think that I don't know. I don't think that there's an onus for like affirmative action, but I think that there is probably an onus to like maintain the avenue for the other person to engage in some kind of restitution if they ever so choose to, you know? Like if Dima Mama ever wants to like have a meaningful degree of restitution, then I'm willing to like make room to let that happen and let there be peace, for a lack of a better word. But like I can't really make her do that. I can't tell her what to do, and if she doesn't realize what she did or why it's wrong, then there's really nothing else that I can do personally.
when do you think that in the hope of genuinely changing someone's mind or bringing them to an understanding on something that could be tied into their understanding of their identity, it is a good time to stop the conversation?
Yeah, I can answer
Or
that.
do you think that's not...
Well, hold on. Wait, hold on. Let me just respond to this. You blocked her and then banned her. Yeah, I blocked her and banned her. I think that she is being incredibly toxic. I'm not going to associate her with her until she shows me that she can sufficiently rebut being toxic, right? Also, people in the chat, stop talking about Destiny. We're not talking about Destiny right now. But yeah, no, like if you think that I'm not going to block her and ban her from my community for being the way that she was, then I don't know what to tell you. I think that until she sufficiently rebuts, like shows me that she's not going to act in the same way in the future, then I don't want anything to do with her. If she shows that she's not going to do that in the future, then, you know, we can have that discussion. But at this point, I'm of the impression that she hasn't changed. Anyway, so like in a conversation about, so let me back to your question. In a conversation about something sensitive, when is a good place to stop the conversation? So I mean, I've heard like essentially this take. I don't know if this is the take that you're getting at, but I've heard some people be like, Riley, you should have stopped the conversation. There were several times that you should have stopped the conversation. And so there's some kind of degree on onus on you for like quote unquote continuing the conversation. So again, the general way that I approached, like that I thought about this as I was going through it, right? Essentially what I was seeing was that Demon Mama, I mean, like very early on, essentially, like if you like were to map out the chain of events as they happened, essentially you have point A, we're just talking. Point B, I bring up the point that like, hey, you know, like I've noticed that like in this type of logical argument that you can run into this kind of issue. Point B, she responds negatively and doesn't engage with me. Point C, I'm like, wait a second, it's very alarming that you aren't engaging with me. Also, you're a public figure, so you should really like think critically about this, because if other people trust like your, like if other people rely on your ideas, then you could cause harm if they take your ideas and end up in a dangerous situation where they can be sufficiently rebutted. And then I'm trying to think, was that point C or point D? Next point, you can like, and I mean like this gets into a cycle, right? She basically responds with some combination of demeaning me or not engaging. And eventually it gets to the point where, because she is not engaging with me, eventually she's just like, no, I don't want to talk about this, right? Like it's very clear to me, and maybe you read in a different message, but that the reason why she didn't want, like she talked about, no, I don't think I want this conversation to go on. Wasn't necessarily that because like she cared about me or whatever. It's because like she didn't like that her ideas were being pushed back against. Maybe that's too speculative of a read, but that combined with the fact that she was like demeaning me for no reason, the fact that like she was being very uncharitable and like insulting me personally for no reason, seems to indicate that like she probably felt like she was like she probably felt in some way unsure of herself and didn't want to just like be like, oh hey, I'm not familiar with this idea. Like she didn't feel comfortable just expressing that she didn't know about a concept and just asking me to clarify. And so like for me, so go back to the question like, oh well, Riley, should I have realized that should I have realized that I should have ended the conversation? I don't think so. I mean like for me, like it's not, I was operating out of primarily concern. And so that concern was never assuaged by the end. Like I was just as concerned at the end as I was at the beginning. Well, I guess not at the very end, because at the very end I basically said fuck you and hung up, right? But like I didn't want to hang up because like I'm the kind of person where it's like, you know, when I'm engaging with something or someone that I am concerned about, I usually am the kind of person where it's like, no, I want resolution, you know? I want to be able to like actually get through this person. I'll do whatever I need to get through that person. Like I'm a fixer. I make shit happen. And so like I'm not sure if there's a great answer of like when I should have hung up, but as far as like my internal calculus, that's why I didn't.
Okay. I guess the point I'm getting to is, or my stance often is, it takes people some reflection and time to change their stance,
Yeah.
especially on so it just becomes often like when I see someone trying to pin someone down on an issue like this, and when I say pin down, like I understand why you do this with people who are feeling like they're in bad faith or people who are being bigoted. Like I do this in my chat occasionally. I say, no, answer this question. But it ends up becoming very adversarial. And I start wondering how, like, sure, you're going to get it maybe with debate bros if you can pin them down and really force them to have that conversation. Yeah, sure, maybe they will change their stance. But I start wondering if you're at that point, do you think that that is useful in getting people to change their mind?
Wait, hold on. That wasn't until then. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm looking at my chat like, Elle, why are you... Hold on. My admin is not listening to me. Or at least that's the impression I'm getting. Because she's like, Riley, why didn't you talk about the thing... Why are you talking about the very end of your conversation? And I'm like... The reason I brought it up was because, like, I tried to reach her throughout the entirety of the conversation, except at the end. That's the only reason I brought it up. But, like, don't... I don't know. I'll have to talk to her later. But anyway, it's... I guess that for me, like, I can understand the idea that, like, it can be difficult for someone to change their mind in the middle of a conversation. Like, in most instances, I can agree. Like, if someone tells me something that, like, is really, that I just never thought about before. Like, for example, the other day I had a conversation with, I mentioned this person earlier, like someone who's really good at formal logic, who articulated a way to be able to do a self-ID, like a self-ID definition that can be able to avoid an infinite regress, right? Now, I didn't necessarily, like, say that I was going to adopt it personally in that conversation because I'd never heard of it. I'd never thought about it. I need to think about it more. But I told that person, like, oh, wow, that's a really cool way to think about it. I'm not going, and I asked them obviously like a lot of questions, and and Avi was in the conversation, someone else who I talk about logic with sometimes. And like I asked Avi a lot of questions about it, and there was a really cool conversation. It was like it was genuinely productive in my opinion. Like, and that VOD will go up tomorrow for people who are interested in watching that. Like, I think it's one of the best conversations I've had on my channel so far. And so like, essentially, in that conversation, if that's anything to map onto, right? I think that like there's like that's a situation where I think that like it's good to be able to recognize, like that's an example of where someone specifically like myself had an instance where I heard an idea that rebutted, at least to some degree, like something that I believed, or at least an idea that I held, or like, you know, like the belief that like essentially before that conversation I was of the impression that like no self-ID definition could work logically, or at least in formal logic. And after that I was like, oh, actually there might be a way to be able to do it, you know? And like the way that you handle those situations, like even if you have to change your mind or even if it like takes you a while to change your mind on those things, like just being able to like be polite about that realization and not personally, like, you know, I didn't personally attack that person. I didn't instigate that person. I didn't like cause any harm to that person. I just, you know, I just had a conversation. And so, yeah, like if you just need more time to change your mind on something, then I think that's entirely reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable to, because you need more time, to like try and attack someone personally.
No, I definitely agree that the personal attacks are not acceptable, for sure on that one. Overall, like, I followed the argument and I'm still kind of struggling with some of it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's fine.
I
Like,
think...
I'm fine, like, talking about it or explaining it. Like, if people want, like, I don't know, I like talking to people.
I think the main... I'm gonna have to go back and I'm gonna think on it a little more. I will note that I ended up... I really did not like your examples. I'm glad that you found better examples because I was struggling with those. I didn't feel like they, in the examples I'm referring to being the, like the Jesus Christ one. So I'm really glad to hear that you're doing, that you've found some other ones that might be more helpful.
Yeah, like, for example, I don't know, like, the transracial one is a good one that seems to kind of cut to the heart of a lot of those conversations. And then also the, like, if you want to talk about, like, the difference between a category in particular, I like the idea of, like, the car, right? I think we talked about this before, but like broadly speaking, if you ask everyone within society to draw a car, most people are like not like people are not going to draw the same thing, but most people are going to draw like pretty similar ideas, right? Like recognizing that like even if there's not like a hard and fast definition for what a car is, like society recognizes like broadly there's something there, right? Like there's broad trends that emerge for for the collective ideas of generally what a car is, you know? So yeah, I mean like those are good examples, I think.
Yeah. All right. I have a feeling I have a few more questions in regards to gender, but I do want to know, I really appreciated how you handled the gender dysphoria issue and the issue of non-binary people.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. A lot of people are, like, interpreting from this, like, oh, I'm a trans med or a true scum or whatever. I've literally...
Yeah, I fought with chat early about that.
Oh, you fought with chat early about that. Yeah,
briefly, someone came in and said, like, Riley's trans med, and I was like, Riley said this, Riley said that. I don't know how you're getting Riley's trans med from this conversation. I really didn't understand how that... I still don't understand how they're reaching that conclusion.
Yeah, no, it's weird because my admin, or several people in my community were telling me, oh, Riley, no one's thinking that you're trans med. Oh, it's just a minority of people. Oh, don't worry about it. It's not that many people, but like a lot of people are taking this. And again, like I have no idea why. I legitimately think it's similar, in my opinion, to like the reaction that Natalie had, like when she released videos, like various videos, whether it's like the pronouns or the aesthetic video. Like it seems to be like a very similar experience, even though literally like neither of us have ever said anything invalidating non-binary people. More people, hold on, wait, more people believe that since you put out the video, though, was my point? Wait, what? When was that ever your point? You said that no one believes I'm trans med. No, do not change your argument on me. Don't ever change the argument on me. I cannot believe this. I'm still arguing with my chat. This is ridiculous. But anyway, I'm sorry. Thank you. Like, yeah. No, the TLDR. I don't know why anyone would take away that interpretation. I never said anything about dysphoria or that you need dysphoria. I never said anything that like, oh, only binary trans people can have this. I never said any like combination of those words in any order that would ever imply that. I don't even think that's a reasonable take from that. Like, even if you had a problem with me using the term objective, like, I don't even think that would work because, like, I'm still basic. Like, even if you were to interpret that, like, uncharitably as if that's, like, oh, that's the true gender, that's the one that really matters, that's basically, like, a Judith Butler take right there, right? Like, that's literally, like, if you were to just rely on Judith Butler for your definition of what gender is, that's what it would be, right? And that's obviously inclusive of, like, not, like, beyond just non-binary people. So I refuse to believe that like anyone who's saying that like I'm trans medicalist or true scum or whatever is actually operating, like actually has listened to me adequately. But yeah, I'm sorry. Like it does make me like, I'm sorry, that just makes me a little bit frustrated because like I have never said any of these words or any words that would lead a reasonable person to believe these things, and I cannot sufficiently believe that like people who are saying that about me are actually listening to me. Like, they're listening to, like, some imagined version of me, but not me.
It's been months. Are you all right?
I'm fine. I got used to it.
Okay.
Got used to what?
I might pop back with... I gotta, like... I watched that video through twice, and I want to think a little bit more on some of my questions around the specific gender issues.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for trying to have the conversations and caring so much about bringing those, bringing logic to the communities and solidifying those logical bases.
Well, I mean, like,
I might.
Or sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
I was just gonna say I'll probably reach out to Demon Mama, ask some of the same questions. What do you think you could have done better, etc.
Okay.
But I always feel like maybe I come in, I don't know.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know, like, you're super cool, and I like you, and I appreciate, like, and I like being able to talk, too. If you want to talk to Demon Mama, then, like, obviously I'm not, like, yeah, go for it. I'm not going to tell you who to talk to and who to not talk to.
Yeah.
You know, but, I don't know, like, for the longest time, when I, like, just my experience, and, like, me going throughout being a trans influencer, like being a you know, a trans content creator in this space, like inhabited with other people who do this, I spent so much time and effort trying to be like that mediator person and trying to have as many good relationships with people as possible. And like, I don't know. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't strive to try and be like that person, but I tried so hard, and there were some people who just never wanted a relationship with me. Like, no matter what I did, no matter what I did, every single time I tried to like reach out to them or be nice to them or whatever, they would just choose to deliberately ignore me or be obtuse with me. And at a certain point, I just have to watch out for myself more, because like if it's not worth the effort or the time, I'm just not going to try. I certainly hope that you're able to have a better, that you're able to do better to like have good relationships with as many people as possible. You have like certainly the reputation that would lend itself to that. It's just that like, I don't know. If you want to talk to the mom and you think that you're able to like reasonably like make some change there, then like all for the better, right? Like I am all for resolution, restitution, all that good jazz. My hopes are just not very high.
No, yeah, and not everyone's gonna get along. I think that's just the reality of the world. It sucks to see these things become so explosive, but you know, we're not gonna, people are human. Yeah. We'll see. I wanted to pop in and see what your thoughts were following up on everything. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate you talking to me. I don't know. For whatever it's worth, I enjoy. Like, I think this is actually like, have we talked before on stream? I know
we
we've
haven't.
DM'd.
This is our first offer. I hate it. I hate talking to people about quote unquote drama for the first conversation.
Listen, I hate
the worst.
I mean, like, I'm used to just like being here and just doing research streams with chat and getting maybe like I'm usually like a 50 viewer Andrea, right? Like that's what I'm used to. Do you think I like being here in the middle of all this? Like, no, absolutely not. Fuck that. Like it's terrible. But you know, I don't know. It is what it is. So yeah, no, it sucks that this is hopefully the next time that we talk, it can be under like better circumstances. Maybe before we have a follow-up conversation about gender, we can have like a stream about how
veganism.
Yeah, sure. But like a super light one, like a super just like how to like just teach me how to like cook vegan, and like maybe that's like the first step. And then
no, I would love that.
Yeah, and we can go from there. Because if I just like learn how to make good foods and it's cheap and easy, then you know it'll probably just naturally follow.
Honestly, tofu is where it's at. Tofu or beans. Beans are so good. Do you like beans?
Yeah, I love beans.
Yeah, you're gonna be fine. It'll be fine. Have you had you've probably had tofu. Have you cooked it though?
No, I've never actually cooked with tofu. Like I'm very I do a lot of cooking, but I'm historically like I don't know. Like usually I cook with like very cheap ingredients because it's kind of like when I lived down in the South, both the place where I worked at and also just like living on my own on a budget, kind of called for that. So I usually cook with just like whatever I can find cheapest at Walmart. And I'm trying to move away from that because now I actually have like a slight budget for being able to buy food. So you know I'm trying to buy like better ingredients and like cook healthier and all that. Like I'm gonna be making some soup later, so that'll be good. But no, I sorry, that was a tangent. I have not cooked with tofu though.
No, I love to hear it. People's cooking history and their journey on that is always interesting to me. So I honestly, when I went vegan, I was like a homeless college kid and I ate terribly. It was horrible. It was horrible. But and then I finally started, once I finally started get to learn how to cook and have my own kitchen, and then especially that when you get that little bit of budget and you're like, I can maybe actually have decent food, it's so exciting until you start fucking up your recipes. And then you're like, it's ruined. Oh my goodness. But yeah, sometime we should cook together, maybe do a cooking stream or something. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds great. All right, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, perfect. And I'll catch you around, Riley. Have a lovely day.
Thanks, I appreciate it. You too, Lumi. Talk to you later.
Later.
Bye.